Welcome to Networking in Your Community. In this session, we'll learn how networking begins by knowing what impact it is you want to have and learn how to cultivate relationships to build social capital while you continue to make adjustments to meet your goals. I'm your host, Andy King from the Vista Training Unit, and assisting me today are my colleagues, Amy Kanata, Bethany DeSablin from Education Northwest, and Molly Palzer from the Vista Training Unit. You'll see us in the chat and the Q&A to assist you during today's session and to help you get your questions answered. Our special guest today is Denise Riedman. Denise served as an AmeriCorps Vista member in 1994 and 95 at the Denver Indian Center in Denver, Colorado. Denise is now the Director of Career Development and Alumni Services for the Trachtenberg School of Public Policy and Public Administration at the George Washington University here in Washington, D.C. She also does private career coaching through CareerHappinessCoach.com. Denise is an active member of AmeriCorps Alums, and she serves as the official AmeriCorps Alums Career Coach. We're delighted to have her with us today. Now let's take a look at our agenda. We'll start out by talking about why it's important to have a network and to build one. We'll start by learning before doing, looking at some of the ways that you can find out where you want to be going. We'll review some online resources, and we'll also talk about real-world connections between people that happen offline or face-to-face, and then sort of wrap up by a long-term perspective on networking. So that's a quick look at where we're going to go today, and now I'm going to turn it over to Denise.
Thank you so much, Andy, and thank you so much to everybody for your patience. Technology is never fun and is always easy as we like, so I just really appreciate for all of you guys hanging on, and I promise we will make this as interactive as possible, try to address everything that you have. I will talk fast, I will tell you that, because we have less time, but know that this is all recorded. You'll be able to look at this later if you can't catch something, so I'll try to make sure I emphasize what we need to get covered today. So let's get started. So the joy of networking. Anybody look at these pictures that it seems kind of familiar, that this is when we think about networking, we think about that kind of a guy in the top right corner, a little swarmy. People aren't always that comfortable with it. This is not what this is about, and this is not, I don't even love the word networking. I talk about building a network. I looked up first, as soon as I was like, let me see what synonyms there are for networking. And I looked up these words, and I thought, oh my God, no wonder people don't like this. It's about personal or professional gain and the word schmooze and all of that. Then I actually looked it up in the dictionary, and I was much more happy to see the definition there. And this is what we're focusing about. It's not, to me, about the professional or personal gain. To me, it's really about helping people understand that it's a supportive system. So we're going to go in, and I'm going to actually have you do a little bit of a poll that will hopefully be able to go up to launch a poll. I don't know if that's going up. There we go. So I just want you to do a quick poll on this, what you think is the top reason to cultivate a network. So grab which one that you think from this long list of things. Do you think that this is the most important? So just take a minute to put it in there. And then we're going to actually show up results. And as we go into the results, I'm actually going to talk a little bit more about it, and then we're going to pop back into the results of the poll that they're going to show in just a few minutes. So what is this about networking? The term that I prefer that addresses all of that. Can we show the results to what people had on there for the poll? While there's a little bit of a...
Just 1 second here. It's tallying.
Okay. So while that goes up, I'm going to, just for the sake of time, keep going. I like to think about social and career capital. And that's what we're talking about today when we were designing this workshop. This is not just about networking for a job. This is about how do you build a network for the work that you're doing now in your community. So let's see what some of these results were. Interesting. So we've got building a long-term career got a lot of energy, connecting with the community, So maybe you can tell from what I have up on the screen now, this is a little bit of a trick question, because the reality is it's actually all of the above. When you're building a network, it's for how you're doing your service, it's for things outside of your service, it's for getting a job, it's for being knowledgeable, it's if you decide you want to run for office. So this is why I think about the language, and this is a framework I want you to think about everything today. It's about the broader picture of social and career capital. So let's think about this. This is the typical scene of networking. Great, you get a business card or you exchange numbers via smartphone. So that's a typical response. This is often the next typical response people have. What do you do afterwards? Often when people do networking workshops at this point, they're going to go right into, okay, this is what you need to do to network. These are the events you need to go to. That is, to me, a short-sighted approach. Whenever I teach this, people often say, oh my gosh, you spend a lot of time on this next piece. This is, to me, the most important piece. It's knowing yourself first, knowing your organization, and knowing your field. When you take the time to do this, you will be leagues upon everybody else. Your comfort level with building a network will be beyond everybody else. So I'm going to take a little bit of time to talk about this. First, thinking about knowing yourself. These are the basic things you want to take the time to know regarding who you are. How do you figure some of this out? Let's go to the basics of ABC. First, assess. I'm a big fan of some formal assessments. They can be fun, and these assessments will end up, they'll be sent out to you as part of the link that I'm talking about, things like Strength Finders, VIA Character, MBTI, and True Colors, and you'll get these sent out as a link afterwards. Really fun, easy ways to get an idea about who you are and who your strengths are. The next thing, we'll go into the B, be aware. Start noticing what things that you're reading, what you like to go to, events that you think you should be attending but you actually always skip, things that you read. Just notice what's grabbing your attention. And finally, converse. Talk to people. Ask others what they see as your biggest strengths. Go to these different things, these events, and learn about yourself. So first, the ABCs of yourself. Next, we're thinking about you need to make sure you know your organization. How do you know what causes or what competencies your organization? What's the reputation of your organization in the community? As we all know, when there are different events, there are certain organizations that are known as the leaders in the community. Who are these players? And it's important for you to take the time to know that. For example, I used to work up in Boston at a nonprofit up there. When the Boston Foundation had an event, everybody came. They were a connector in the community. You want to know who these people are. Same way that you're going to do it was the other one, the ABCs. This is kind of the strategic plans you do of your organization, assessments, finding out what people think of your organization. Notice where your organization put its time and dollars, where the executive director is engaged in. Converse, talking to previous vistas, board members, getting input. Again, take the time to know the culture, the organization, the values. Then next, we're talking about knowing your field. This is vital to being knowledgeable about what's going on, okay? So these are the kinds of things you want to know. When I was first doing work, when I was running a VISTA program up in Maine, I actually saw some people who were doing some VISTA work in Maine. I saw the people up there and the participants. I needed to know what the language was, who was funding what, where were the dollars going in that community. When I was up there, mentoring was a really big language. Now we talk a lot more about the term being caring adult. You want to be knowledgeable when you're in the community that you know what's in the news and who are the influencers. So taking the time to do this. Now we went ABC, now we'll go with DEF. First, do. Going to events, going to young professional events. There's a lot of different conferences to be attending. We can talk more a little bit about that later on how to do that while balancing everything else you have. Educate. E-newsletters, Twitter feeds, articles. You should set up a separate email account so you're getting news about things in the field. And you don't have to read every single thing, but you should know, who are the people that are constantly the ones writing about the topics that your field is engaged in. And following. LinkedIn makes it easy to follow groups. Following people on Twitter. Again, this just keeps you current. You want to know who the big community connectors are. They're the ones that are going to enable you to have the most access to all of that. And what that's going to enable you to do is when you're in that same situation and you got the person's business card, this becomes your response. It's not, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but that you might be connecting them with something. You're knowledgeable about what's going on in your field. Again, I can't emphasize this enough to take the time to do this. Another thing, the next part that I really want to talk about that dispels the common myth about networking. And a lot of times when people are younger in their profession, they have a hard time seeing how they can give and receive and connect. It's even just thinking about yourself in this way for you and your organization, how you can be doing this. So this statistic is staggering to me, that if you start just even sharing articles, you don't need to be the person that's knowledgeable on, say, what's going on in environmental issues in your community, but you read this article, so you share it with your network, you end up getting contacted by recruiters. So how can you give? How can your organization give to other people? How can you be open to receiving to other people? The research has shown that we often overestimate. We're so inclined to think someone's going to say no. And the reality is people tend to want to say yes. They tend to see you as more of a leader when you are asking for things and they're able to give back to you because they see you as someone that's really engaged. And connecting. This is an easy way. When I first moved to town, I was connected with two very, very high up people at a nonprofit. I was very new to DC. I couldn't do anything for either of them than myself, but I realized that one person had a resource the other one needed, so I connected the two of them. Easy things to do is to connect people to each other. Then you're seen as someone in that role versus every time you typically think about networking is, oh, I'm asking for something. So you want to keep thinking about how can you do this? How can your organization do it? Your nonprofit organization you might be at your service at might not have a lot of resources, but you could volunteer time, or maybe you have a space that you can let somebody use. Again, just thinking about the reciprocity. Okay, so let's start to get into the nuts and bolts of some of this. We all get so overwhelmed with all the social media. This is an easy thing to kind of focus in on and narrow down, which is what we're going to do today. So instead of feeling like this, we're just going to focus on 3 of the key ones. Why do I focus on these 3? Because statistic and research is showing right now, these are some of the big ones. And again, I know that there's a limited amount of time. So this is a report that came out of a group called JobVite that studies lots of employers. They are using LinkedIn. This is what they're doing. This is big for them, and they plan to use more money around social networks. You want to be thinking about this. That you want to be just tapping into this as a resource. Okay, so the research is showing this. First, then let's talk about here with Twitter. Okay, so first thing you want to do within Twitter is you want to start following people. We talked about this before. You can be selective on it. Don't have it sending. First, I used to have lots of things being sent to my smartphone. You don't have to have that. Be selective. Use Twitter lists. Manage this. When you do informational interviews with people, ask them, who are you following? Who are the connectors? Being strategic about that. Again, as you begin to follow things, you're going to hear who's hiring, what's the news, which nonprofit is leading things. This is a way for you to brand yourself. When you're getting things, if you start to retweet consistently in your line of work, you're seen as someone who is informed. Make sure your welcome message, if people say they're following you, sets your message, and that your bio, it's just like people say you don't want to dress for the job you have, you want to dress for the job you want to have. It's the same thing with your online brand. You want your online brand to be where you are going, so think about the messaging that you do there. And finally, value. What is the value that you are bringing to other people? How are you selectively sharing information? Another easy way you can get involved with this is if you hear somebody get something and an award for something, give them a shout out on Twitter. Give them a congrats. Again, easy ways for you to be in that way, to be seen in this. Easily enough, by the way, there's a lot of great hashtags, so people feel free to put in the hashtags if you want to put this into the poll. Because I know a lot of you are probably much more social media savvy as me. If you have some great hashtags you're using to follow key influencers, people in your field, around national service or in your specific field, You can type your answer in there, and then we're going to send this out to people, so you're going to get the results of this. Again, you all are already such a great resource for each other. So I just want to show you some examples of how organizations, and you can tap into this with organizations. They're using Twitter. Twitter is actually right now one of the hottest places for organizations to be posting jobs because it's free. So you can hear real-time event of what's going on for them. Easy. Your organization you're at should be think about using Twitter again for the brand that you're messaging and how to expand your reach. Another organization that seems to be doing things, foundations, will be posting how you can find out that there's a deadline coming up. Organizations like GovLoop is a great example. They help facilitate people getting government jobs. They facilitate the effectiveness of government, so you start following people like that around an industry. Job boards, great to see. These are ones I just recently pulled out, so things are coming up. And then, again, kind of industry organizations like Net Impact, which is about social innovation. So you can find out who the influencers are. So let's move on from Twitter, and let's look at, one other thing, sorry. You want to think about creating a Twitter list because that's going to help you manage a lot of this. Okay, so let's talk about Facebook. A lot of people just use Facebook socially. There is a definite role in this. You want to be very aware of all this. Companies are starting to use Facebook more and more, and Facebook is actually trying to get a little bit more into this professional space. I think they're trying to kind of move into the space where LinkedIn has gotten a lot of leverage, so be aware that this is going to be growing for you yourself personally, for your professional development around jobs, but also the way organizations are messaging. So one thing you can do with Facebook, make sure you customize your URL so it's a clean URL message. You're using status updates if you have one for your organization, or if you have a separate Facebook account for you personally, professionally, you want to make sure you are doing that. Just a quick thing too, people put on a little bit of how Twitter list works. It just kind of aggregates all your Twitter followers, your Twitter groups, so you can get them into one list. Both are good for searching for jobs, Twitter or LinkedIn. I can't say one is better than the other because some people will post just on Twitter, some will post on both. You have to find what works for your job. Okay, so make sure you're really thinking about, if you don't set up a separate Facebook account for something professional, think about your images. Think about what the messaging is up there. I mean, I'm sure you hear this all the time. Add some professional details. Facebook is trying to create more places for that in their bios, so keep staying tuned for what they're doing. Like company pages that you want to be following. We've heard stories over and over again of companies that will post jobs to either their Twitter account or their Facebook page first, rather than putting it up anywhere else or paying, because they want to go with people who are already following them. They want them to get a jump start. Join events and groups. You can hear about selective events that would make sense for your field. And finally, really important, make sure you're setting the right privacy standards. You want to make sure that if you have things on there that you don't necessarily want to have other people seeing, that you change those privacy standards. How are organizations doing it? This is an example of what Year Up is doing. They're posting a lot of their reports so you can stay informed. So if you're going to an event at Year Up or something that's related to the work that Year Up does around GED, you're able to say, oh, I just read this report from the Opportunity Divide of Microsoft Initiative. This goes back to the first thing that I was talking about, those ABCs, DEF. It's that you are much more informed as you're networking. Okay, let's talk about LinkedIn. Huge right now. 300 million people globally, 100 million in the United States. Company page usage jumped. This is just in the past couple years. Significant. This is for you when you're thinking about recruitment. Just to be aware, recruiters pay a lot of money to get into the backside of LinkedIn and search for passive candidates. They are doing this more and more. So you want to be active on LinkedIn. How do you do that? Let's talk a little bit more about this. So first and foremost, want to make sure you have a good profile because they're going to be grabbing this. Probably not. This is not the best picture. That link is a really great link to see about why your LinkedIn photo is an epic fail. And sometimes they're as pronounced as this, but sometimes it's little minor things. So just do a click onto that site at some point and check out why, some recommendations around your photos and how you want to be messaging yourself. Here's an example of a better one. This is Ben Duda, who I work closely with, who heads AmeriCorps alum. You can see clean, sharp, engaging, somebody you would want to have a conversation with. Okay, let's keep going. So a lot of times people are going to have a pretty basic profile, which is fine. But imagine if you were a student, but you were also interning. You can control the top part of your LinkedIn profile to say what you're doing. You can control what you're messaging. You could even create something on it. You don't have to do what your current job is. Or if you're nearing the end of your service and you're looking to make a transition, you might be working in human services now when you're actually looking specifically to target higher education. You can change your profile title to actually address that. And to even have nonprofit communications professionals, so people know what they're looking for when they're searching for you. Same thing I just talked about with LinkedIn. You want to make sure you get rid of this. So you can very easily do this. You go into your LinkedIn profile, you go to edit in your contact information, and you can get rid of all of that, because this down here, the bottom part, is what you actually want to put on your resume, so people can click through and see the full extent of all your experience. Because on your LinkedIn profile, you can add, if you wrote an article, if you were speaking somewhere, you can add a lot of your media, and you can't do that on your resume. Okay. So this is often people say, oh, this is great. I'm connecting in with people. I have 500 connections. I am doing great. Actually, not so much. I'm not so crazy about this. Why? Because you're using the standard message. It tells me that you didn't take any time to personalize the message. And just because you have 500 connections, if you only really know about 5 of them well, not so great. So again, we're going to talk a little bit more about how to make sure you're using this strategically. Look at the difference that this invitation says. It's one of those things, if I say to people during these trainings, if it's one thing that you come out of here is please personalize your LinkedIn messages. Even if it's one line, it was great meeting you at the City Year event the other day. Would love to stay connected. Make sure you're using this selectively and just putting these messages in there. It's also a great tool to, set up informational interviews. Yes, in terms of the question that just came through, when I tell people about doing the upgraded LinkedIn account, I usually tell them to do it for just a couple of months when they're getting close to finishing up their service. You don't have to do it all the time. It will allow you to email people more directly. You will come up higher on recruiter search engine, so do it selectively. And then, again, I'd rather you have smaller number of connections, but they're people that you know. So how do you manage some of this? How do you find some of these contacts? LinkedIn makes it really easy for you. On your home page, it'll say people you know in the corner. You can click on the See More, and they're going to, once you have your LinkedIn profile, they just want to make suggestions for you. So they just make it really easy. One little thing to just be mindful of, this little connect button right here, if you click on this, it's going to automatically send that automated message without personalizing it. So what you want to do instead is click on the person, go to their profile, and then click connect from there. That way you avoid accidentally sending that standard message. Again, don't just click on that connect button. Okay, another great way to find connections is you go under the Connections tab to find alum. Your schools will come up under there, and you can start to find alum all through different areas what you're doing. This is also a great way to find networks of people that you want to have informational interviews with. If, say, you're working at an organization and you want to partner with a couple other organizations for an event and you want to see if you know anybody for something, or you want to write a grant with an organization, you can use this search feature really easily to check people that you have a connection with. So how do you manage this? Once you become a first-degree connection with somebody, I encourage you to use their relationship feature, and you can put in a note on how you know somebody. You can tip how to reminder. You might say, you know what, gosh, I had a great conversation with that person. We had a great coffee. I want to remember to follow up with them. Just shoot them a note to yourself and say, in 2 weeks or 2 months, I want to follow up and send them this note. This one's great. It's how you met, because you can't remember how you met people. Was at the 4th Sector Conference today. Bam, we had a conversation about this, so that way you can remember, when you follow back up with them. So let me show you a little bit more. This is how organizations are using it. Again, really providing a lot of valuable information. You can see where they're noting in this one that they're hiring. You also can see how you're connected to somebody right away on the home page. So if you're interested in connecting with the organization for a job, through your service, if you want to find similar organizations, this People Also View tends to come up with ones that are alike, because as we know, there are hundreds of thousands of nonprofits, and it can be so overwhelming. This is a way to help manage a lot of this information. So I would encourage all of you to go back and not just look at your own LinkedIn profile, but look at the profile that your organization has and think about, what is the message you are sending? This is a great one from United Way. They're very, it's like what they're doing. You're getting that information from them. They're sending a clear brand. Another thing from United Way, again, you can find out about reports or their hiring. This was all things I just pulled up from them. You might not get this information if you were just searching in other places about this organization. So you can keep their updates. Just a couple other things about LinkedIn before we go into networking online. LinkedIn groups. People are always like, what's the purpose of LinkedIn groups? So several things it really gets you to do is, one, if you're a member of a group, you can email people directly even if you're not connected with them through a first-degree connection. That's huge, because a lot of these LinkedIn groups have thousands of members. So you could identify by searching in the members of a group that you're a part of. If you're really interested in international development, you join a lot of the LinkedIn groups international development. You can email them directly. You can ask questions and say, I'm looking to move to Latin America and work on microfinance in, Costa Rica. Does anybody have a recommendation of the key organizations to reach out to? It's a way for you to brand yourself by answering questions, by posting articles, and also finding out about insider events. You can find out about different events. Sometimes people will post jobs there, again, before anybody else will do this. They might say, we don't want to do a broad search. We're just looking for this right now. We have an immediate project. We need somebody for just a temporary contract. You find out through them. You can search via groups via LinkedIn. I also encourage you to think about when you look at someone who, say, has a job that you want, say you want to get into programs at a nonprofit, look at the profile of that person, go down and see what groups they're a part of, and then LinkedIn makes it easy for you to just click join the group. So it's a way to manage all of this information. We put up another poll, so if there's some groups that you might recommend that you're a member of, please type your answers in. We'll send this information out to everybody. You all are a wonderful resource for each other, so share whether it's a nonprofit group, it might be something specific in your area, it might be the field you're in. If there's people who are specifically working, say, on early childhood education, and there's some great groups that you want to be a part of, so tap into that. Okay, and finally, I know we all know this. You've got to check your social media footprint. You want to be making sure you know your online brand. You want to be Googling yourself. I had someone misquoting me on a website, basically endorsing something about their work that I would never have known unless I had searched Google. And I just came up with this, and I had to ask this person to remove that information. It was false information about me, and that was sending a bad message. So Google yourself on a regular basis. There's sites you can use. If people have similar names as you, you might want to think about using a middle initial for yourself and then start using it on your LinkedIn and on your resume so that becomes your brand. I had a recent incident where somebody was interviewing a candidate. They searched the person's Twitter feed, the students did, and they saw something that the person had written in there, and they didn't like the language, and that really counted against a candidate. So it's your responsibility to monitor it. Okay, so let us look here at the next piece, which is finally offline. Okay, like I've just went through tons of online stuff. I will tell you, as much as I'm a very, very big fan of LinkedIn, I'm not a huge social media person. I'm actually much more, I prefer in person. So it's so important that we know really about networking offline, which is where a lot of things. We're going to do another quick poll here. Okay, so which of these do you think is the most important for networking? And I'm not sure, there we go. Which is the most important for networking? And while people are going to go on here, just for the sake of time, because we started late, I'm going to show you really the reality and make this easy for all of you. Trick question again. Sorry, I'm full of these trick questions, but there's a point to this. It's not about, let me just go to tons of events and know tons of people and have these really long, in-depth meetings. What it's really, truly about is quality. It's being targeted. So that's what I want to talk more about at this point. Smart event going. Think about the events you're going to. If you find you're going to events and you're not paying attention to them, don't just go to them to go. Be very strategic about what would make the most sense. Go with others. It's going to make you feel much more comfortable when you're there, but just make sure you don't just stick with each other. This is a good one to think about. We all have a difficult time balancing our time. So I tell people, if there's going to be, if you're not really that interested in the topic, but you know that the networking, say, is going to be really good, and the networking's before, go early, leave early, and sit in the back, or vice versa. If it, networks on the flip side, just sit in the back. So you're there for part of the talk, but you're not having to force yourself to be there the whole time, and you're able to engage in the networking. People do this all the time, and particularly I will tell you, a lot of people at very high levels, they're not going to all of these events. Some of them you definitely want to go to. This goes back to the early part where there's certain topics you want to make sure you're knowledgeable about, but we know that you can't go to everything. So if you're making a decision and you could maybe go for part of it, think about it in that way. Oops, sorry, arrive early, leave early, arrive late. When someone's done talking, I often encourage somebody to be the first one in line. You're going to quickly talk to them. You're going to get that connection. They might not have time for everybody else, so you can make that connection. You quickly say, it was great hearing this chat. It was great hearing you on the panel. I'm really interested. Would you mind if I followed up with you with an email and maybe set up a time for coffee? Very quick conversation. On the flip side, you can also be the last one in line. You are taking a chance that the person won't have time. But I remember once I did a training, it was an AmeriCorps training, and the person was the last one. They were so wonderful. They actually wanted to keep talking to me. They were very nice about it. They said, would you mind, can I talk to you as you walk to your car? And they helped me carry my stuff. Made quite an impression on me, and they gave themselves more time, because when you're the first one in line, everybody's standing behind you. So you just want to think selectively and have teaser conversations. I like to talk about this, the term I often use is being a professional flirt. So when you're being a professional flirt, you want to think very much about not putting it all out there immediately. So when you're going to an event and there's lots of people, you're at this networking event, you might want to say to somebody, I'm sure that you talk to them a couple minutes. I'm sure that there's a lot of people you want to connect with here today. Would love to talk to you more about my interest in your reading program for at-risk youth. Can I follow up with an email with you and for a coffee? You're kind of just flirting with them. You don't have to put everything out there. You're showing them you respect their time. And because of the way you frame this, it gives you a natural way to exchange information. So it's just little teaser conversations that open up something else for you to have longer conversations. Where do you find these events? Okay? So there's lots of opportunities. And again, we're putting up another poll here because I'd like to have you all share your resources about some things that you found to be really effective for networking. Meetup is great. I think Meetup, when it originally started, was very social. I know in my city, and I'm sure in a lot of other cities, there's high-level Meetup events for people specifically in your field that there's some really great talks. Volunteering and charity events, again, you're going to meet with high-level people. If you're really interested in, say, the development field, Volunteering for charity events is going to put you in the world where you're going to have those conversations. Not only are you going to learn about these charity events, but you're going to meet people that are at that economic level that are going to be doing the fundraising. Different talks and conferences, industry-specific. Professional development trainings are nice, particularly if you're new to networking and not as comfortable. The professional development events give you a framework where it's not like you're just walking into a room where you don't know somebody, but there's a training. You're sitting at a table with someone. You give them a natural way to have a conversation. It makes it easier, often for introverts. That often makes it easier if they're not as comfortable with the big spaces. You know, I get that question a lot about people who are introverts. Again, going with other people. Big events are probably not going to be your forte. You know, there's a picture down the lower left, which to me is a picture I pulled from a conference where often people are talking in a lobby. If you're at a big conference and it's overwhelming to you, you might find one person and say, let's just grab a cup of coffee. You know, most of the reasons that people go to conferences aren't what they're learning in the rooms. They're actually what they're connecting with outside the room. So find ways that work for you. And of course, finally, just social. That picture's here in GC. There's a big like national service softball league. You know, meeting with people socially. It'd be amazing those connections you get. So hopefully you all keep chiming in some great ideas about places that are you've found to be really effective networking. And the reality is it's really can be anywhere. So you're at this event. Another question I often get is, you know, how to actually handle some conversations. This link, I found a really nice link at the Muse, which has fantastic career advice that's really easily accessible. Here are some great conversation starters. I'm new to this group. You know, what brought you here? And these are true, again, for not just for you, but if you're trying to build relationships for your organization. Tell me about your organization. What role has your organization had in this initiative happening in the city? The best conversationalists at events are people who ask questions. And if you notice, these questions are simple questions. You don't have to make it complicated. When you're ready to extricate yourself out of a conversation, use the line I talked about before. It's great talking with you. Love to change cards. I'm sure you have other people. The usual, I need to refresh my drink. I need to get more food. I see someone over there I've been looking to try to connect with. Easy ways to facilitate in and out. If you come with somebody else, again, it makes it easier. Oh, I see my friend's over there and I need to go chat with her. So think about ways that make it as easy as possible for you. Okay, let's keep going. We talked about smart event going. Let's talk about smart meeting going. These are all very common sense. If you feel like you're not being authentic to something, it's just not going to work. An example I thought of as I was preparing for this is, so when I first moved to DC, or first moved to Boston, I really did not know anybody or anything, and there was two up-and-comers I used to meet at a lot of nonprofit events. One of them didn't know me really very well initially. We got to know each other. Every time I saw him, he would look at me, we would talk. He was very present. He'd spent tons of time with me, but he was always present. The other person always was looking over my shoulder for someone better. It felt so uncomfortable. It felt so unauthentic. His conversation with me, stopped having them. No surprise, years later, the person who had always been very authentic ended up working in the governor's administration. The other person I heard, his nonprofit folded. I think his lack of authenticity, I am sure, came back in the way people didn't want to work with him. And going to the fourth bullet down there, adding value, and then the fifth long term, that first person, I eventually got at a position at a university. He needed something at that university. We had a relationship. We hadn't seen each other for a couple of years. He was able to connect with me, tap into it. We had had such a nice, authentic conversation before, relationship. It was a long term. I was able to then add value to him. The middle bullet about super connectors, again, is thinking about that we all have so little time, is thinking about whether it's the organizations. Again, going back to my experience in Boston when I was at Boston Cares, when the Boston Foundation ran an event, I would go to that because I knew super connectors were there, which are people, organizations that are connected in the community. Sometimes they are people who have been there for a long time, whether they're community residents, and we all know them in the community. Those people that just know everybody else in the community. We know this from when I used to do community organizing work in my year of service in Denver. You used to have those people that just knew everybody. You might want to talk to them if you're looking to find out who do you need to bring on board to the event that you're doing in the community. It might be people, nonprofits that are umbrella organizations like the United Ways in your area that are very well connected broadly. So again, thinking about who those people are that are going to be adding value, okay? It's not about grabbing one mentor. I'm actually not a huge fan, to be honest with you, of the word mentor. I think there's a lot of connotations. There's a very funny Seinfeld episode on this. And I'm not about having a huge number of people. What I like to talk about is having kind of a board of advisors, a small group of people that you turn to for different reasons. I have a couple people that I work with that I turn to when I need advice on my coaching and my private practice. I have some other career directors around this. I have other colleagues that I turn to for advice around the national service field. So a small group of people that you really trust to turn to. You can certainly ask somebody, and you don't need to use the term, will you be my mentor? That sounds like, will you be my mother? Are you my mother from that famous book? But rather not, will you be my mentor, but rather, will you be connected with me? Can I follow up with you when I have a question? That's all you really need to say, and you build those relationships. Okay, so the third piece of it is smart meeting managing. We talked earlier about these long, in-depth meetings when you're doing with people. Short and sweet. In your emails to them, if you notice on the note that I put on that LinkedIn message, 15 to 20 minutes, put that in the note. Generally, people in their schedule are going to just naturally block off a half an hour for a meeting, but make it short and sweet. At about the 15-minute mark, if you're having a networking meeting with somebody, you might say, I know I said it was only going to take 15 to 20 minutes, I just have 2 more questions. They're typically going to say, you know what, we have a little bit more time, don't worry about it, but it shows that you're respecting their time. Don't ask what you can learn. There is nothing worse than going into it, having someone come and do an informational interview with me, and they're asking me things that are very easily on my LinkedIn profile or could be an easy search. Use this as an opportunity to find things out that you wouldn't know. What, again, makes it so easy is ask about them, but at the same time, have a hook. You might say, at my nonprofit where I'm doing my national service, we're working on this and I'm leading this project. I'm curious, I saw your organization did this 3 years ago. What was the result? By asking the question, you're still keeping it about them, but that hook is you're working your way in and talking about something that you've done and that you're bringing into the table, something that makes you unique, that they're going to remember you. End with an ask. It might be, can I stay in touch with you? It might be, I was really interested hearing about this social enterprise initiative that your nonprofit is doing. Can I follow up with you or follow up with the colleague that's on this? Or it sounds like you're partnering with this other organization. I think my nonprofit might want to connect with them. Could you make a virtual introduction? And also follow up with an offer. We've talked about the giving and receiving. Even if you don't know how you could help them, in that email thank you you send them, you can say, please let me know if there's ever anything I can do for you. Always end emails that way for those meetings. You're setting up reciprocity. Follow up with them, and then follow up again. This is true even if you're trying to get in touch with somebody and you send them an email for networking, you don't hear from them. Please, if you get off this networking webinar and you remember this, don't be discouraged. Don't take it personally. We all get so many emails and phone calls. If you're emailing to try to set up one of these meetings and you don't hear up with somebody, take the original email, hit reply all to what's in the body of the message, send them a really short note and say, I'm sure you're incredibly busy. I just wanted to follow up on the email I sent you last week. Would love to grab a few minutes of your time if you have a chance. Same thing when you're doing the follow-up with people. You know, you just want to send them notes. If there's something you hear about an article that you know that they might be interested in, send that to them. That's where, again, going back to those basics, those ABCs, the more you're up on your field, the more you're going to know about events to invite people to, articles to forward along. And you could say, you might have already seen this article, just want to let you know about this. If there's people that are really big super connectors you like, I know it might sound like stalking, but set up a Google News alert, which is very easy to do. Just search for Google News alert for certain organizations that you really want to know in the news or certain people, so that you can hear if they're mentioned in an article in your local paper, and you can send them a note and say, congrats, I saw that you were mentioned in the Detroit Times. Great piece on you and what your organization is doing. Again, it's showing the value added. Okay, we've got a few more slides before opening up to Q&A. Can't emphasize this enough. And the extra little piece I want to recommend to all of you is if Jane introduces you to Joe for another follow-up meeting after you met with Jane, email Jane and say, Jane, thank you again for making the referral. I'm going to be meeting with Joe in 2 weeks. Really appreciate it. Then after you meet with Joe, email Jane again and say, it was great. Joe was able to help me on this and this. Again, please let me know if there's anything I can do. Short and sweet emails, but that extra thank you note, and not just thanking the person you met with, but the person that made the connection, shows that that's the kind of person that you are, and that's what you would do for community work. So when a job opportunity opens up at their organization, they're going to be thinking about that person that is incredibly diligent and attentive, because that's how they're going to treat their colleagues, and that's how they're going to treat the community. Okay, so please remember that this is long-term. When I was working over at the Heller School, I was working on a poverty initiative. They ran out of money for the initiative, and they told me there was a position in career services. This was about 8, 9 years ago now. They introduced me to somebody, sent him his resume, didn't even remember the name, walked into his office. He said, I know you. We had worked together about 5 years prior when we were up in Maine, maybe even more than that, through America's Promise. Ended up getting the job, changed my life. Not about instant gratification. I'm a runner. I would love a 0-mile fun run, but that's not going to feel as satisfying. All of this is about long-term relationship building for you and your organization that you're at now, but also for the field that you're in. You know, if you're in the youth development field, people know each other. People are in that space, so you're building these long-term relationships. Okay, so a few more slides. How do you sustain your network? Really easy tips for how to sustain your network. Again, a lot of the stuff we've talked about in here in contacting, sending links, so things that you want to do. Also, how do you sustain your organization's network? If you have a special event that you have a pre-reception for, ask somebody, you know, do you want to come here? Make sure you're following things, connecting organizations. I did a lot of coalition building when I was up in Boston. So I myself wasn't doing anything, but I was bringing the right organizations together to increase the size of the pie. So say, for example, they would end up applying for a larger size grant because they were signing up and writing the grant together as a partnership. So as much as you can do those kinds of things, co-author things for people on articles, partner on events. Again, it's thinking about innovative ways to stay connected. Some of these things happen at random times, so you just always want to be thinking about how am I having authentic conversations with people to create these types of opportunities. And finally, before we go into Q&A, this is the reality. Where the magic happens means we have to push outside of our comfort zone. All of this is not easy. I've been doing this for a long time, community development work, career work, and there are times where I still feel uncomfortable going in. So you want to think about who you are, and this goes back all the way to the beginning of the presentation, that ABC, knowing what your strengths are, finding the right ways for you to build a network. Because here's the reality. I love this quote. It's so much easier to be in that comfort zone, but that's not where the magic happens. And finally, this Mark Twain quote, this means sometimes we do need to sail away from that harbor. We need to get out there. And these are all like tips that you can begin to apply. Think about them. Think about which ones from what we've talked about today you can begin to grab onto and begin to move into. You don't have to do everything I talked about today. Just begin to think about, okay, these couple things I could begin to do. So that is the end of my piece. I know we're going to go into some Q&A. And I believe I'm turning it over to, I think, Andy and Molly for Q&A.
Yeah, that's right. Denise, thank you so much for a really informative, jam-packed, and really engaging presentation. So we are now at the point where we have lots of time to take your questions. So just as a reminder, we have some questions that have already come in through the Q&A, and you can ask your questions electronically by using the Q&A feature on the right side of your screen, or you can do it by phone, and I'm going to ask the operator to remind us of the instructions for asking a question on the phone. Operator?
Certainly. At this time, when we begin the Q&A, if you would like to ask a question, please dial *1 from your touch-tone phone, and when prompted, record your first and your last name. Once again, that's *1 from your touch-tone phone, and when prompted, record your first and last name. Thank you.
Great. And while we're waiting for questions to come in on the phone, we've got a couple that have already come in during the presentation.
Great.
So the first one is from Cariana, and she says, I've had a LinkedIn profile for quite some time. However, sometimes I'm wary of scam job offers. How do you suggest weeding out legitimate offers as opposed to the scamming ones? She said, maybe this is an elementary question with a simple answer, but we're going to put it out there so we can all benefit from it.
Yeah, and don't ever worry about that because a lot of this stuff is you know, it's very, very confusing. What I would always do with these types of scam job offers is I would click through and look at the organization and look at the organization's website. If it's not legit like that, first of all, you probably can let LinkedIn know if you're getting some scam job offers through LinkedIn. But I would actually look at the organization. Once you start to really familiarize yourself with really robust organizations, you'll know very quickly which ones are not, you know, that are really not legit. But I view it as, I mean, I go to somebody's website. If I see, I go to their newsletter on a website, I go to their reports, you can look at and how recently their website has been updated. In this day and age, if a website's pretty outdated, it makes me worried. So it might be either a scam one or an organization that really isn't strong.
Great. Another question, this one comes from Lee, and Lee says, when someone does a Facebook search for me, over 200 names come up. I guess 200 people with the same name. How should I protect myself from this without giving myself a middle name because I don't have one?
That's a great question. I actually am not really sure of an exact answer for this. I mean, I think this is a challenge for people who have very common names. You know, what I know the best way to do is to consistently start to have a message and a brand. So they might not be able to search specifically for your name, but if, say, you're a youth development practitioner and that you continue to work in that field, so that way someone might know that, you know, to look for your name and the word youth development, and they might search for that. Because there's really not, if you don't have a middle name, and you're not going to add something to your name, that's going to be the best way, is that you create a brand for you that people know to search for. I'm open if anybody has any other answers to this that's on the line of things that they've done with. I would love to hear any other thoughts. I'm not sure anything else besides kind of making sure your brand is, and knowing that if that's the reality, that people are going to know they can't know exactly who you are, and you're not going to get faulted for that. I will tell you that much.
Yeah, Denise, I've seen a couple of instances where people have either put maybe their academic credentials, PhD or something like that, after their name. Is one sort of designation, and others they've put their profession somehow. So it might be, you know, lawyer Mike Smith, or so they've somehow indicated the field that they're in or their area of specialty, so that if someone's skimming through results, they would stand out. So it's
Great.
just another couple of examples.
Thank you, Andy.
Sure. We're going to continue with questions and answers, but I did want to mention we have opened the evaluation poll. Not that we want anybody to leave, but we know that sometimes people do have to leave. But we do really want to hear from you what you think, not only of this session, but about webinars in general, and if you have ideas for other topics we could offer. So that's there on the right-hand side of your screen just below the Q&A. So at this point, I'm going to turn to the operator and see if we have any questions on the phone.
You do. You have a question from Ms. Pamela Andrews. And Ms. Andrews, your line is now open.
Hi. I was just curious as to, is there any specific rules to the LinkedIn and Twitter that we should be aware of not to do? I'm not familiar with either. I've not joined either. Facebook is the only social media at this time that I use.
So of things not to do is the question?
Right.
You know, it's the same thing as Facebook, is that you really want to monitor what you're messaging up there. I mean, it's a lot easier because LinkedIn and Twitter, you tend to stay. I mean, Twitter, people will often actually get in more of a dangerous space when you think about what you're tweeting. We hear this all the time with celebrities. Sure. So you want to keep it professional if you're joining it. My Twitter account is a purely professional account. With LinkedIn, I think the worst thing that people can do of what not to do is to just kind of have a half-hearted profile with just a few connections. Because I hear all the time from HR recruiters that they're disappointed if they're looking at a candidate and they don't see them active on LinkedIn, because the reality is a lot of them are hiring people at organizations. They want people that know how to use social media. So if they see that you're not following the right organizations, you're not members of groups, you're not up, your LinkedIn profile is really weak, you don't have any connections or very few connections, they're going to be questioning and saying, well, is this person really serious about the field that they're in? So that's what I would say to you, is that, when you go on, it doesn't need to be, I'm a big fan of some really dynamic LinkedIn profiles, and you can find them. There's some really great ones online, but at least making sure it's a strong profile and that you're presenting the right brand. And there's so much research. Joshua Waldman, W-A-L-D-M-A-N, is known for a lot of his work online for around LinkedIn. But if you search the news, all of these career sites will give you here are the nuts and bolts basics on how to set up a LinkedIn profile. Twitter's easier because you really just need to set up your bio, your welcome message, and then just start following people or be followed by what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no further questions at this time.
Okay, well, we've got plenty of questions here in the Q&A, so we will get to those. Jasmine asks, how would you recommend networking with high-level stakeholders in the community? What's
Andy,
that?
there was before that? I'm sorry.
Say that again?
There was a question before it, when you find yourself in a networking situation. I don't want to skip one of the questions. I didn't answer that one.
I'm not seeing that question.
Okay, I'll answer. Repeat your question again. I'll answer them both together.
Okay. So the question was, how would you recommend networking with high-level stakeholders in the community?
Okay, great. So I'm going to answer that as well as the question that was previous. It says, when you find yourself in a networking situation where you're speaking with someone who's off-putting, how do you politely end the conversation? So these are both kind of in situational things. So one, in those situations, those were the easy outs, as I said before. I've got a friend over there I want to talk to. I need to refresh my drink. I need to refresh I need to get some food. Again, you just easily say to someone, I'm sure there's some other people you want to network with, or I see someone over there. It doesn't have to be someone specific. I'd love to go see if I can find them. It was a pleasure talking with you. So the same things you use, whether it's someone off-putting or someone you want to stay connected to, really easy ways to kind of get yourself out of a situation. The question around networking with high-level stakeholders, you want to think about a couple things. What is the value add that you are bringing? How much time can they give you? Why would they want to connect with you? Now, there are going to be some high-level stakeholders who I have heard are unbelievably generous with their time, and people have always been so surprised that they've reached out to the CEO, and they've been gracious with their time. But you want to think about when you're reaching out to them. One, in your email, and this is true of everybody, when you're doing your subject line, you want to put, if you know somebody, which is always the best way to reach out to a high-level networker, and anybody, but particularly with them, referred by, Susan Smith. If someone made the referral, immediately grab their attention. These emails should be short and sweet. If you can have a hook, I often find that for my students, I say if you're a graduate student, that's a great hook to put the name of our school and that you're a graduate student. I'm a National Service member. I'm an AmeriCorps Vista. To me, I think that is a hook, and I think increasing number of people in the community know what that means and want to give time to somebody. And then you say to them, I was wondering if you might have 15 to 20 minutes, either on the phone or in person, at your convenience, to hear more about X, Y, and Z. You can also say to them, if you don't have time, is there someone else in your staff? You always want to make it easy for someone to say yes and someone to say no. You can also put in the email, if you are available, here are some specific times and dates, or I am available on, January 20th, 21st, and 22nd at any time at your convenience. If they want to meet in person, you always go to their location. You want to make it as easy as possible for them. You always want to follow up. You want to be incredibly, incredibly mindful of their level. There's a great book that kind of goes into a lot of this stuff even more in depth called The Startup of You. Really, really recommend this book. One of the co-authors is the founder of LinkedIn. There's a lot of career books out there that I feel like is kind of rehashing what everybody else says. This book has a lot of new tools in it and just different frameworks. It talks in there. There's a section that talks about when you're networking with people that are of different levels than you.
All right. Great. Well, our next question comes from Stephanie, who asks, what if I'm unsure exactly which field I want to go into after my service? Is it okay to post professional articles, et cetera, about more than one profession of interest?
Stephanie, I think I've been working for a long time, and I still don't know what field I want to be into. And I think that that's wonderful. I think it shows, that you have a broad range of interests. There's nothing wrong with that, and there's nothing wrong. Part of what this book talks about, and what I talk about with this networking, and all of this networking we're talking about, is building a career that allows you to pivot. I went into career services when I was 37, so I was working for a while and pivoted there. Then I pivoted into nonprofit. So all of when you're building a social and career capital, this helps you to keep as wide of a network with this, so it is absolutely fine. I volunteered this morning at a nonprofit. I stay connected in nonprofit, in national service, careers. I keep myself that way, so my LinkedIn, my Twitter, all of this reflects the fact that I have varied interests. I mean, my interests aren't so all over the map, but absolutely, and here's the thing, you might always have many, many different interests. It's figuring out what you want to do next and being as well positioned to keep as many options open for whatever you want to do after that. So always be comfortable with that.
Great. Next, Leanne asks, I haven't used my social media profiles for a while, or I use them inconsistently. What are some ways I can improve my profiles now that I see I need to use them more?
Again, what I talked about here, going to Josh Waldman's site, I encourage you you can tell so easily if you start looking at people's profiles. I'm a big fan of using LinkedIn to do what I call deconstructing careers. Find people who have careers that you really like or would want down the road. Look at their career path. That's a good tool to be able to use and say, wow, I like this person's career path and I like the way that their profile is. And really just look at that. There's a lot of resources online for how to do that. What I would first encourage you to do, Leanne, is just set up your structures, get yourself comfortable with the way that you're using it, make sure your brand is good, and then start to get more active. So before you start joining groups, before you start posting updates, just make sure it's all clean and sharp. And look at a lot of resources. But again, if you look online, there's just great examples. And you'll see if you search on LinkedIn, you can see ones that you read and you're like, wow, this person wrote a message that's very compelling, that's brief, it grabs my attention. A lot of people are using LinkedIn now to link to other social media. They might have a presentation and link that in. So start with that and then slowly build up a network strategically before you kind of go crazy with all of it. And just, again, think about it, manage it. For example, as I said, I'm a fan of Twitter. I'm not on Twitter every day at all. I'm probably only on Twitter once a week where I check in on things. So I'm on LinkedIn every day. I get the LinkedIn updates. A great way to stay connected is you start getting updates from people in your network. Easy way to congratulate and stay in touch with people, because people often ask me ways to maintain that network. So just start slowly and manageable so it doesn't overwhelm you.
All right, let's turn to the phones and see if we've had any questions come in there.
Yes, your next question comes from Logan Hubbard. Your line is open.
Hi, I'm going to a conference in April, and I'm going by myself, and I got to go because AmeriCorps is letting me go, and it's full of like CEOs and all these people who are excited about getting things done and are very far in their careers. And I'm a recent college graduate who's doing a year of service, and so I know that y'all recommend going with people, but I'm going by myself. How do I kind of, and I guess, make a friend group, create a group of people that I can be with and kind of associate myself with at the conference?
That's great. First of all, don't minimize your year of national service in your college. We all do that. Let me tell you, doing national service was the best thing I've ever done professionally. I love my national service, and people give a lot of respect to it. So first of all, what I would encourage is, as much as you can do before the conference, is look at who the attendees are, the panelists, the speakers. and do some research and maybe identify, start following a few people on Twitter, identify a few people that you feel like you're really interested in. And so you at least have some information and some comfort level. You might reach out to people via your LinkedIn network, your Facebook, your Twitter, and tell other people that you're going. You might reach out to the AmeriCorps network and see if there's anybody else attending this conference that's AmeriCorps member, so first and foremost. Something else you might reach out, I'm often a fan of, and this is a great, actually I didn't include this in here, it's a great tip around networking, particularly when you're not as comfortable with networking, is that for conferences and events, ask if you can volunteer. You might reach out to the conference organizers and say, I'm going by myself, I'm young, is there anything that I might be able to do to volunteer at some type of, maybe when people are doing registration. It gives you an easy way to start to get to know somebody. So you might ask them if you can volunteer, if there's a networking, reception. You might say, is there a role I could have? A lot of times people are so eager. First of all, they need the help. Second, they've all been in your shoes, so that's another nice way. When you're at these events, I encourage you, it sounds like you're picking off the weakest of the herd, but I would say when you're at these events and you see a person by themselves, they're probably feeling the same way as you are. So you might go up to them and say, hi, I'm new. This is my first time at this conference. Have you been here before? It might feel a little awkward at first, but they're probably so relieved to have somebody else talking with them. So, you might go up to someone who's at one of those high boys for a reception, and then you go, and there might be one or two people. Go stand with them. Stand by the food when you don't know people. Again, it's an easy way, or stand in the bar line and just ask somebody. If you're not drinking, you might just be getting a Diet Coke and just, I'm not proposing that you're sitting there in the bar line the whole time. Before and after you, and just talk to them. What do you think about the conference? That's all you need to say. Really simple lines like that. So again, thinking about if there's ways to volunteer, find people who are by themselves. When you get to an event for the rooms, I tell you for the events, go into a room earlier, sit next to somebody, and the same thing. What brings you here? What organization are you a part of? You might say to them, I'm here by myself. Can I sit with your organization at lunch? I've been to a lot of events like that, and people are so interested in helping. And also, again, reaching out to your network and seeing if there's anyone else that's going to be there.
Thank you.
Sure.
There are no further questions from the audio participants at this time. Just a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, please press *1 from your touch-tone phone, and when prompted, record your first and last name. Thank you.
All right. Rachel says, the organization I'm serving with already has a Facebook page, but I'm interested in starting a Twitter account. Any advice on how to keep updates exciting and relevant to the organization's projects?
You're always thinking about what's the value add. Why would someone want to follow our organization, particularly for Twitter followers? Retweeting other organizations that you're partnering with sometimes is really helpful. That might have some other news. Is really good. Teasers, I know our Director of Communications will often send out a lot of teasers to people. We'll challenge people and she'll send some pretty provocative questions to people about different issues that our school is working with. So that's what I would think about. Again, what is the value add? Not necessarily for your organization, but why would someone want to be following your organization? And then the best thing to do is look at other organizations that are similar to yours, whether it's in your area or not in your area, and start to see what kind of things they're tweeting that grab attention. Look and see what kinds of things they're tweeting that get retweeted. I'm really all about not reinventing the wheel. See what other people are doing that's working, and then doing that.
Great. And Ariana really gets to the crux of things and says, is it necessary to have a Twitter or a Facebook account?
My perfectly honest answer on that is I think you have to have a LinkedIn. I think if you don't have a LinkedIn, recruiters are going to wonder. You're going to miss out on huge opportunities. I personally think you can get away without a Twitter and a Facebook. I mean, I have a Facebook personal account. I hardly ever use it. The only thing about Twitter, I would say, even if you don't do like anything for yourself with it, this report that came out from JobVite said that's the #1 area that recruiters are moving into for posting jobs because it's very fast and it's free. So that's the one area where I would say, again, even if you're not being really active on a Twitter account, just to use it to be able to look for jobs and to find certain hashtags that are relevant for your jobs. For the Facebook for Professional, right now, I don't see it really going yet into the space. Again, you might just have a basic account so you can look at other people's. I think it's very hard in this day and age to be a professional without LinkedIn. The other two, I truly think you can get away with at this point. There's other career, what I do in my line of work, I say all the time, is an art, not a science. So this is an art. There's a lot of other career people that would say you absolutely have to have this. I'm being realistic, knowing not everybody is going to want this, and you have to go back to that concept of authenticity. If it doesn't feel right for you, you don't want to do it. But think about the LinkedIn really is one that it's just the benefits are huge in jobs, your profile, finding opportunities, just even understanding your field. It's really important.
Great. And related, Claudia asks, is it common for people to have two Facebook accounts, one for personal and one for professional?
I think it's increasing. I think more people are starting to do it in that way. I am seeing more and more of that. Again, Facebook has just, I follow a lot of the news about my field, and we are seeing that Facebook is trying to position themselves into this space. I don't know where it's going to go yet, so I'm not sure if you're going to absolutely have to go into that space. Again, you might just use Facebook to really look and see what's available up there and keep that separate and not create a professional one. I don't know what's going to happen in another year or two. It'll be interesting to see.
Great. And then sort of shifting back to the real world face-to-face networking, Stephanie says, do you have any tips for keeping names and faces straight at events or remembering names afterwards?
I wish there was a magic answer for that. That's a struggle that I have. A couple of things that I recommend that I'm sure you've all heard about is use the person's name like 6 times in that conversation. Pair something with them that you can think of, with their name, like Andy King, who was on the other line here. I might, all of a sudden when I think of Andy, I might visualize a crown on his head. As quickly as you can after you meet them, jot down some information about them on the back of a card. If you've just exchanged information via iPhone, jot that down so you remember some things. Go to their LinkedIn profile so you look and see their pictures immediately. There is something else to really quickly do. But again, if you can just write down some key information about them and then go back, another easy thing to do is introduce them to somebody else, which again forces you to continue to use their name over and over again. And please, if other people have other great ideas for this, put some things on there, because I would say this is probably something I am not great at.
All right.
Just another quick thing. If you can yourself wear something memorable, people will remember you, whether it's a Vista pin, whether it's, a shirt from your organization, if you can help you be memorable too.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Oftentimes we blend in and then we wonder why, everybody has trouble remembering people. Mm-hmm. We're nearing the end of our time. We will cover a couple more questions. Jess Marie says, I currently use Facebook and LinkedIn. Are those enough, or should I become active on other social media outlets like Twitter? And maybe you've already covered that.
I feel like I've already answered that one. I think we're good on that one. Andy, there's one I really want to grab before the time goes. Can I grab this one?
Sure.
Alyssa Folan writes this, because I think this is a very common one. I really want to do this. She said, this is probably silly, but when I talk to new professionals, especially those who have far more experience than me, I get really nervous and start to repeat what I say, like awesome or sure, and then I forget what they said. Any pointers? First of all, breathe and know that this is just part of being a newer professional. You will continue to grow out of this. Think back what I said, Alyssa, earlier on. The more you know about the person you're talking to, the field, the more you know about yourself, you're going to feel more knowledgeable and more confident. Highly recommend Amy Cuddy, C-U-D-D-Y. It's one of the most famous TED Talks about power poses that you do that in 2 minutes helps lower cortisol, which is your stress level. One of them is like a Wonder Woman power pose. I tell people to do this for interviews. There's a lot of research behind this. Also, going back to ask questions. The more you just know that the best networkers, you don't have to have the answers. No one's expecting you to have the answers. Easy to say to someone, tell me more. That's interesting. Can you explain that more? I'd like to understand this. Why did your organization do this? You don't have to have the most complicated questions. You don't have to have the information. Just keep asking them questions, and just know that, like, this is just part of it. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you're going to get. Think about, for you, what enables you to be the most comfortable. If you're doing this consistently and you're in large networking situations where you don't know people, start going to smaller events where it's like these professional development events where it's small groups where you build up your confidence. And then it's building muscle. You're building networking muscle. So that way you get, you start with the lighter weight events. So that way when you go to these conferences, like the person had addressed earlier, there's the big conference. When you go to those, you're just more comfortable. So build your muscles up slowly to build that networking skills so that by the time you go to the big ones, you've got that confidence.
Great. Here's a question from Vilma who says, regarding the strength finders, et cetera, how do we best communicate our strengths and tendencies to be best utilized in the workplace?
That's a huge, huge answer. I have to be honest, that's like a webinar in and of itself. There is, what I would say to you, there is a lot of research. Gallup has several books on it, like Strength Finders 2.0 on leadership. I can tell you that research has shown consistently that people, instead of focusing on your weaknesses, when you focus on your strengths, you actually are much more successful professionally. When people, another piece of research, when people find new ways to tap in and use their strengths in different ways that they have done, again, they are consistently more successful. So this is, this is actually, to be honest, Andy, this could be a training of itself. I actually do a lot of workshops around positive psychology and strengths. But again, I would check out Gallup. They do a lot of research on this.
All right. Let's see, we've talked a lot about Facebook and LinkedIn, a couple other comments there. Laura asks if it's okay to not accept professional contacts on her Facebook, which she uses for personal use.
Yes. I keep mine. I actually keep mine very, very separate. I have students who want to do Facebook with me, and I don't accept it. And you can also not accept LinkedIn requests, too. If someone sends me out a question I get with this, a LinkedIn request, and I don't know them, if it's clear that it's a scam, I just hit delete, like they're clearly someone who is not related to me at all. If it's someone that's potentially connected, I usually, instead of hitting accept, will send them a note and said, I apologize if I don't remember if we've met or how we know each other, but can you just jog my memory and let me know the connection? Typically, it's someone who didn't know me, but you don't have to accept every LinkedIn either.
Great. I think we have time for one more question. Nicole asks, do you have suggestions on how to improve a bio or a profile for someone who has moved around frequently?
Oh, you can, I don't think, to be honest, I actually don't think it's a negative, Nicole, particularly, you look at my LinkedIn, I don't know if it has, but I've moved around a lot. I actually don't think it's a negative. I think what's important, what you want to think about with your bio and your profile is this is your chance. It's the same thing on your resume. This is your professional profile on your resume. You get to shape how someone sees you. So for your bio and your profile, if you moved around frequently, what you want to play up might be your ability to be flexible and adaptable. You might play up the threads that run through, like, for example, I used to teach environmental education. I taught it all over the country. Well, instead of playing up that I moved all over the place, I might focus on my environmental education skills, which are transferable. So you might focus on your skills, focus on the messaging, and play up the fact that you've shown yourself to be able to quickly adapt into different cultures and different workplaces, and use that. Again, the bio profile, professional profile on your resume, you get to tell the story of how you want someone to see you, which is what, all of this is about. Remember, this is your story. You get to figure out how you write your story, how you want people to see you, what you want this impact to be. You've chosen to do national service because you want to have an impact, and this is what this is all about. How do you build yourself up for the careers you want, for the nonprofit you're working on now, for your service, and think about what is that story and how do I best message that story online, offline, through all of my avenues.
Great. Thank you so much. And at this point, I want to thank everybody for participating today. And for my colleagues at Education Northwest and here at Vista headquarters for helping out to manage the Q&A and the technology. And also to let you know that our next webinar coming up on February 12th is called At Home in Your Community, where we're going to take a look at what is community, what are some of the dimensions of community, and how do we enter into community effectively so that we can be accepted and do our work well, and also feel safe and secure in knowing sort of how we fit in. So look for an invitation for that and other sessions coming up. And again, thank you so much, Denise, for all of this great information. I apologize if we didn't get to all of your questions, but really appreciate all the participation. Thank you all so much.
Speakers, please hold the line for your post-conference. All others, your call has concluded and you may now disconnect. Once again, your call has ended and you may now disconnect. Thank you for your participation.
You can leave it up for a minute. You want to close the session?